This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Howdy. How are you this Wednesday, July 29th? I hope you're well. I hope you have something fun to do tonight or tomorrow or Friday or the weekend. You know, at the top of the hour, the news talked about how Kevin Warsh made the big announcement that the Fed is keeping the rate the same. And the Wall Street Journal, and also you might have heard at the top of the hour, three Fed board members voted against it. Well, those three voters, those are the same three voters that have been voting against, were voting against what Jerome Powell wanted to do, too. They make it sound like this is, three voted against it. Oh, my God, this is something new. No, it's not something new. Those same three voters. And here's what's interesting. Those three voters disagreed with Kevin Warsh in that they thought the Fed rate should go up. And you may have heard Donald Trump's reaction. He's mad that they kept it the same because he thinks the Fed should lower the rate. Yep, that's what the country needs, lower that rate. Loosen up the money supply. So keeping it the same displeases the president. But if those three that disagreed had gotten their way, the president would have been even more displeased. So unlike Jerome Powell, Kevin Warsh has said that he thinks there's too much transparency, that people don't need to know, like the inner workings. And one of the things that I think Kevin Warsh objected to, because Jerome Powell used to signal how he thought the vote was going to go. You know, he would say things. He wouldn't say flat out, this is honestly, definitely how we're going to vote. No, he would just say things that would indicate, Jerome Powell is intimating that the rate might just go up a quarter or go down a half. And Kevin Warsh doesn't believe in that. He believes that when they make these announcements, we should all be surprised. He did do a very lengthy statement and took questions. He did a lengthy, multi-page statement. I know, because I sat and listened to it. Because I thought, maybe I'll share some of this on the air. And he went on and on and on and on. And then I thought, well, I'll finish listening to it myself. But I think this is a little too lengthy to share. Because the bottom line is 9-3, the vote is that the interest rates of the Fed rate should stay the same. And that is what it is doing. And next time around, I'm sure we'll be surprised again by what happens. And I'm sure he will go to the podium and read another 4 or 5 page essay to the reporter standing by, and then take questions. So I don't think it's really weird. Kevin Warsh was Donald Trump's guy. He wouldn't have probably gotten the job without Donald Trump signing off. I don't know what was said behind closed doors, if Kevin Warsh made Trump any promises, but he sure seems to be taking his independence to heart. And remember when the Supreme Court ruled that independent federal agencies, they're not really independent. They exempted the Fed from that. They understood exactly what they were doing. To say that an independent agency that the people working there could be fired on the whim of the president? Well, guess what? That's not an independent agency, is it? And they exempted the Fed because they knew exactly what they were doing, that they were basically politicizing every agency, giving Donald Trump even more power. But they also knew that he could pretty much screw up the entire world, at least the entire world's economy, if he was able to wreak havoc with the Fed. So they exempted it. So Donald Trump may not be happy with Kevin Warsh, but there is no legal basis for getting rid of him. The other big story of the day, today was the day that I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it kind of is, that Anthony Fauci was subpoenaed, called before a committee to testify, basically because of Rand Paul. Rand Paul has had a bug up his butt about Anthony Fauci for a long time. And finally was able to convince people they should subpoena him. And he should have to speak with a Senate committee that Rand Paul was the chair of. You know what? I'm not even going to say anymore except to set this up. When Anthony, when you testify before a committee, especially if you're like an expert or a high profile person, you get to make a statement before the questioning begins. Anthony Fauci took the opportunity to make a statement to talk about what was going on in his opinion and what he was going to do about it. Ooh, listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I served at the NIH for over 54 years, 38 of those as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Over that period, I proved that I believe in and respect the value of legitimate congressional oversight. In fact, I testified before and/or briefed Senate and House Senate and House committees well over 200 times over those 38 years. During and after the COVID pandemic, I have appeared multiple times for hearings in the Senate and the House, usually under oath, and sat for several days-long transcribed sworn interviews, answering questions about the very issues that are now the subject of this hearing. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion. Therefore, although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government and my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
And that is just what he did. Every time he was asked a question, he read it right off a piece of paper. On the advice of my legal counsel, I am invoking the Fifth Amendment and a right to not answer that question or whatever the legal wording was. Ooh, Rand Paul was not happy. Not happy. And now Rand Paul wants to have a vote to hold Anthony Fauci in contempt of Congress. You know, and Rand Paul was also the one who acquired, all or parts of Anthony Fauci's diary, especially the entries he kept during COVID. And he's released portions of it, not anything that really shines a light. I mean, Anthony Fauci has always said that he believes COVID originated in the wet markets of China. In the diary, it says, that he's been, listening to people who believe it was created in a lab, and that's really something he wants to think about. And so some people, Republicans, are saying, look, see, he really did. He didn't always or believe that it came from a wet market. See, his diary shows that, he thought it was really possible that it came from a lab. Oh, and also the other things that were released simply to embarrass him. Guess what? Anthony Fauci's human. Talks about, I was interviewed by so-and-so today. Really nice interview. I was profiled in this magazine today. Really great picture. Really, really good press. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that something we should... if we're going to hold Anthony Fauci, if we're going to take him to task for being proud of the fact and writing in his diary about all the press he was getting, I'm sorry, I think that's a pretty darn human thing to do. I don't keep a journal or a diary, but isn't that what it's all about? Hey, this happened to me today. Isn't this cool? I'm so proud. Whatever. Oh, Anthony Fauci had an excessive fixation on media and media coverage. Excessive? I don't know. If I was being interviewed by the world's top interviewers, television, the world's best magazines, I think I'd be pretty darn proud of it myself. Whatever. None of us are perfect, If you want to dig through somebody's personal life and find something to take them to task over, guess what? You're going to find it. Whether it was something you did a long time ago or whether it was something you did yesterday, you're going to find it. That's just how it goes. So let's move on to Todd Blanche. You know him, you love him, you'd like to live without him. Todd Blanche, who is trying to get a committee to vote his nomination to lead the DOJ to the full Senate. There's reporting today that the committee may delay its vote on Todd Blanche. You know what that means? That means they know they don't have the votes. They don't want to embarrass Todd Blanche. They don't want to embarrass Donald Trump. So they'll postpone the vote till next week and hope that Donald Trump can twist some arms or threaten some people. And that, and because this has happened before, there have been a few Republicans that have said, I don't think I'm going to vote for this. And then all of a sudden, they're getting phone calls from the White House. And the next thing you know, they've changed their mind. So there's word that this vote on Todd Blanche might be postponed. One of the people who has expressed concern is not Susan Collins. She expresses disappointment as well as concern. This is just concern, is Senator John Cornyn, the Texas senator who ran for re-election. Only Donald Trump decided that he could get somebody even more loyal than somebody who voted with him like 98% of the time and got behind Ken Paxton, truly one of the worst human beings who has ever been in public life, but probably one of the worst human beings that's ever been in life. And John Cornyn was defeated in the primary once Trump threw his weight behind Ken Paxton. So John Cornyn, lame duck, Texas senator. His political career is probably over. You know what? So he doesn't really have to worry about ticking off Donald Trump anymore. And he has said that the way things stand right now, he's not going to vote for Todd Blanche because members of the committee have been asking Todd Blanche what he has been asked by judges. Mr. Blanche, you say that this $1.8 billion slush fund of Donald Trump's, you say that idea is dead, that that's not going to happen. We'd like you to put that in writing. Oh, no, I can't do that. I won't do that. Well, wait a minute. Is it dead or isn't it? And if it is truly dead, as you are telling us, in no uncertain terms, write that down on a piece of paper and sign it. Tell us it's dead and gone. Nope, won't do that. Well, John Cornyn has pretty much said that that's a tipping point for him. Yep, that could be the reason why he doesn't vote for Todd Blanche. This is from an interview Cornyn did at Capitol Hill. It's actually two little clips put together. They're both very short. One is from yesterday, one is from today. Both are about Todd Blanche. Listen to John Cornyn on Todd Blanche.
It has to be in writing and signed by Todd Blanche.
Do you need to see that by Thursday in order to be able to vote him out of committee?
Yes.
Okay.
And
So right now, he should not be counting on your vote unless that is done. Is that
That's correct? They've been kind of radio silent for the last 24 hours. So I think my staff is talking to them, but we're not. They know what they need to do. They just don't want to do it.
So there you go. The vote was supposed to take place Thursday. The reporting today is that it may be postponed. You know, so Todd Blanche isn't willing to walk away. Donald Trump hasn't told him to walk away, and so they can go to door number 2. But they may postpone the vote, which means that Donald Trump wants to pick up the phone and try to figure out what it's going to take to get John Cornyn to vote his way. John Cornyn, the man that he basically ended his political life. And you might think that that would motivate John Cornyn to be a thorn in Trump's side. But we have seen in other instances where Donald Trump has kicked an incumbent to the curb, and they still collapse when Donald Trump brings the heat. One of the people who hasn't done that is Thomas Massie. Yes, the Republican congressman from Kentucky. Yeah, Trump kind of kicked him to the curb as well. Only Thomas Massie isn't folding, isn't withering or quivering in front of Donald Trump. He is standing tall. When he lost in his concession speech, he said, you know what? I got 7 more months, implying that he could thwart Donald Trump a lot in 7 months. He also originally said that when the congressional election comes around again in 2 years, he's going to run again. But maybe there's another office for him. If only there were a Senate seat in Kentucky that was eligible for a special election. You know, kind of like the one that Mitch McConnell holds. Mitch McConnell, the disappearing man, the man who supposedly can have these conversations with Republican lawmakers on the phone, but can't find a couple of minutes to call into a television station? Interesting. It is the beginning of next week where we hit the deadline. If that seat isn't declared open by August 3rd or 4th, there will be no time for a special election, and that seat will then just remain open until the November election. And you might say, well, why would that puts Republicans in the Senate down a vote? Why would they want that? They would want that because they are terrified that if there is a special election, somebody they don't want Thomas Massey or somebody of his ilk will win that seat. That would be bad, so they say. So they're still trying to convince us that Mitch McConnell, he's out of the hospital now. He's in rehab. And boy, he talks to us all the time. But he doesn't talk to a television station, doesn't talk to a reporter, certainly doesn't talk to Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. And what's Andy Beshear going to do about it? Well, time's running out. But I'm sorry, Andy Beshear released this. He wants Senator McConnell to prove not that he's alive, because, if he's on life support, I guess technically he's alive. Andy Beshear wants Mitch McConnell to prove that he can still serve in the Senate. Listen to what Governor Andy Beshear said.
All I'm asking for, and the people of Kentucky are asking for, is transparency and honesty, that Senator McConnell still has the capacity to serve. And I hope he does. I wish him well. I hope his health is improving. But if he can have a 17 minutes conversation with his protege, he can call into any of your news stations for 3. All we're asking is just a little bit of proof. We have seen rampant speculation across social media and elsewhere. It could all be fully avoided, and it's all within Senator McConnell's power. But because he won't do that, the fact is that we don't know.
Don't. And what he was referring to is Mitch McConnell not only talks to select senators, he apparently had a phone call with a member of his staff, too. You would think that the staff member would have said, Senator, can I record part of this so that I can release it to the media and end all this speculation? Wouldn't a staffer want to put this all behind them? So what's Beshear going to do? Well, he doesn't have a lot of time left to do something. I don't know if he can make these kinds of declarations over the weekend. But even if he can, he's got like 4.5 days. I think he should just say, you know what? I've seen no proof of life. And I think that we've got to declare that there's going to be a special election. So I'm saying that there's going to be a special election for this seat that Mitch McConnell clearly can no longer serve in this seat. Do it, Beshear. And if suddenly Mitch McConnell walks out the front door of a rehab center and says, I hate you all, I'm alive, then Andy Beshear says, oh, Mitch, I'm so glad that you're well. People were so worried about you. That's why I did what I did. Yep. So I've used up most of my time because I don't really want to talk about Iran. We had a ceasefire. Well, we stopped bombing them. We said, let's go to the table. Let's talk. Iran apparently thought about that and said, not yet. You haven't suffered enough. Well, yeah, we're suffering too, but we can take it, and we think we can outlast you. So, yeah, no. So, the United States and Saudi Arabia, because notice how this is growing. The United States and Saudi Arabia attacked Iran. Iran attacked military bases in Jordan. The people of Jordan, who are in a very, very repressive country, like 100-some people took the chance that they could be sent to prison. They wrote an open letter that said, please kick these Americans out of our country. Close down these Air Force bases or military bases that we have in Iran. Just do it. Get this country out of our hair. And that's kind of where we are now. And where we will probably be for the foreseeable future. We are going to take a break. 773-763-9278. We're going to read your texts and take your calls when we come right back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls and reading your texts. I got a text from somebody. They said, why can't the McConnells do this? And they showed a picture. For those of you who weren't really alive or aware, in 1985, Ronald Reagan had cancer surgery, was in the hospital. He could have gone dark, could have gone quiet, but instead they opened up a couple of the windows in his hospital room. He waved to the people out of one. Nancy Reagan waved to the people out of the other one. If Reagan can wave from a window in 1985 after cancer surgery, why can't Mitch McConnell do the same? And if he is having trouble with his mobility, put him in a wheelchair. You know, we'll take that. Why not? You can still, I mean, look at Governor Abbott of Texas. You can obviously still serve in a wheelchair. Of course, you have to be healthy enough to show up and do things, which isn't going to happen. Bob from Elgin texted in about the Fauci hearings being the committee Fauci's testifying before is chaired by Rand Paul. I'm sorry. Bob from Elgin texted in, Rand Paul is a complete lunatic. There can be no good reason for persecuting Fauci. Yep, he is kind of one of a kind, isn't he? That Rand Paul guy. Remember, he's the one that one of his neighbors, they were having an argument over garbage cans, and his neighbor started to beat him up. I'm sorry. That's not funny. That is not funny, Joan. Stop it right now. Okay, somebody else texted in. Rand Paul must have a short memory. Trump claimed the fifth over 500 times in the deposition he had to take. And somebody else texted in, the more I read, the less I think we'll get out of this mess. I'm doing my best to keep the momentum going, but it's hard. Dr. Fauci applied the scientific method to the events which happened over time, which means things change with evidence and new data. I'd rather have Fauci over Kennedy or the Wizard of Oz. Yep, sounds about right. Let's go to Richard, who is on the line in Chicago. Hey, Richard, thanks for the call.
Hello, how are you? I just was thinking back to, you mentioned Reagan. When he was shot, they brought the cameras in also, and they threw around papers like he was, working, and he was really under sedation still at that point. So I remember that, happening. But I wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell, and it reminds me of when he delayed Supreme Court pick. I'd like to see that woven in when they talk about this, because he seems to be delaying here again. But what you have to think back, I think, is think about what is the benefit for them not disclosing what's going on. If he's well, it's a no-brainer. The whole debate goes away.
Right.
So you wonder if the reporting about this is at some point, and maybe it has, come to the conclusion that ought to be the thing that's in the news. Why, if he's well, is he hiding?
Right.
So what is he hiding? And see, I don't see that. I just hear the back and forth, the discussion of what somebody says, instead of coming to some sort of a conclusion and including that in the reporting. That's and that's what I've been wondering all along, is what is the benefit to be not disclosing his condition if he's so well?
Mm-hmm. Well, you make a very good point. And why is it that only people who we don't trust to tell the truth are being contacted by Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, they should ask those people too. I mean, enough of this already.
Well,
what do we need
the
this
MAGA liar
for,
who's on CNN, Jennings, he sat on the arena with Casey Hunt, and he said, I talked to Mitch for 20 minutes. And Casey said, pull out your cell phone. Let's call him right now. And he was like, well, humming, can't do that. Yeah.
Well, that's good. But, I mean, I'd love to see this tied into their other shenanigans. I mean, the way they packed the court where Mitch did this. And I don't know how to exactly portray it, but it
bottom
sure
line,
is ironic.
it's not crooked if we do it. I think that's the message. Do you get that? It's not crooked if we do it. It's only crooked if you do it.
Yes, they certainly seem to be above being held accountable, and and that's why we're in this mess that we're in. Yeah, but as I say, whenever I hear it, I just think, well, I don't even want to hear about it. I want to know why he hasn't just come disclosed and proved that he's fine. Mm-hmm. And I think Bashir ought to jump on that. Ought to call his office and call the question. Get a recall vote on this.
I think so too. I think so too. What's the worst that could happen? He's mistaken, and suddenly Mitch McConnell appears. Well, sorry, Mitch, I made an honest mistake. Yeah. We were really worried about you, and nobody had heard from you, so we thought you were dead.
Yeah, it's in the public's best interest. I mean, enough of this. Our country needs to know, if this man's a criminal, or if he's incapacitated. And so, anyway, I think I will call Bashir's office for what it's worth. Why not?
Might as well. Might as well. I mean, I think, Bashir is trying to give them enough rope to hang themselves, but I hope he doesn't let this deadline just come and go. I really don't. Thanks for the call, Richard. Very much a pleasure. Got this text about Dr. Fauci. Who cares if Dr. Fauci was proud of the attention he was receiving by the press? What does that have to do with his expertise? Well, I think the point they were making was, oh, look at him. He's got such an ego. That must be all he cares about. That's my guess, is the point that they were hoping, the thing that they hoped people would take away from it. Okay. Let's go back to the phone lines. Chi-Town Dave is on the line. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Hey, how you all doing this afternoon?
Peachy, how are you?
Well, I am certainly not peachy. I don't know if that's going to come back or not. My wife passed away. My wife passed away a week ago.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Dave. That's terrible.
Yeah,
my heart goes out to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really grieving over her. She was on life support, by the way, and life support only lasts for so long, and it finally gives out. Her body gave out. Everything shut down. So as far as Mitch McConnell, I mean, if he's on life support, that's going to give out pretty soon, too. I was going to say on Fauci, Fauci had once said during the COVID crisis, he once had said, we'll never be able to shake hands again. Well, I disagreed with him on that, and I disagree with him on some things, but there's no reason to persecute him now. Why are they persecuting him now? I don't understand. I really don't. Why is Rand Paul persecuting him?
Well, I don't know, and but apparently in the words of Anthony Fauci, Rand Paul really has a bug up his butt about Anthony Fauci.
Why?
Something he can't get over. Good question. I don't know.
Why?
Why? Why indeed?
Tell me why. Tell us why.
Why? Well,
I'd like to know. Why does Rand Paul have a bug up his you-know-what? I don't understand.
That's a very good question. Inquiring minds want to know. If anybody has any insight into this, shoot me a text or send me a call. And again,
I want to say hi to my friends Paul and Jim and Steve. I want to say hi to them, especially my buddy Paul.
Well, you know what, Dave? Why don't you introduce Paul, and I'll take him as my next call. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Paul, this is Chi-Town Dave. I really enjoy your calls, hearing your calls, and hearing your perspective. I was born blind. I guess he was sighted at one time and lost his sight. I don't know when. I was born blind, though. So I've had a lot of experience in my life, and I know Paul has had, too, a lot of experience in his life, even when he could see. So,
well, that's a great intro, Dave. Now we are going to be taking Paul from Seattle. Paul, you got a double intro today.
Wow. Great. Thanks, Dave. Speaking of Rand Paul, when the Republicans were not receive Stability Trust Fund. Stupid reason, but I mean, stability as I was at the time. I've now matured into regular Social Security, 66 and 10 months as of a couple of weeks ago. But the Republic fund this fund, which is separate from the regular Social Security Trust Fund, to Kevin McCarthy's office. I called them and I said, but he said, there's going to be too many of you. I said, there's just getting to be too many of us, huh? Yeah. And then Rand Paul said, the Social Security disability, just have anxiety and back pain.
Yeah. We need to get to a break. And Paul, you're kind of cutting in and out. So we are going to talk. We're going to take more calls and read more texts when we come right back after this.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
We just talked to Paul from Seattle. Now we're going to go to Ron, who is on the line from Chicago, who wants to continue our discussion about Medicare. Go ahead, Ron.
Yes, I'm lying too, so it's 3 in a row.
Wow.
Well, yeah, the Social Security is, they're increasing the benefits next year by 3.6%, but they're doing something with Medicare Part D. They're raising the premiums, I think, or...
Oh, Medicare, Donald Trump has said he's doing away with Medicare Part D, which is the Medicare drug coverage. It's going to remain for 2026. But unless something changes in 2027, it will be gone. Thank you, Donald Trump. So if you were, a lot of people have a supplemental drug plan that they pay extra for. But if you are relying on Medicare Part D, good luck with that, because according to Donald Trump, it's going away.
Yeah, okay. And Trump said the other day that he's going to bomb all the bridges in Iran and bomb all the power stations. Isn't that a war crime? I mean...
there have been so many things he's done, But yes, the rules are that you cannot go after the civilian population. You are at war with the government, you are at war with the military, but you are not at war with the civilian population. And to bomb like a water treatment plant or a desalinization plant, that's not considered a military target.
Yeah. And also I'm pretty sure he's planning on dropping a nuclear bomb somewhere in Iran. I think that was what the meeting was with Yahoo yesterday. I think that they were planning that. So we'll have to see what happens. But it doesn't sound good.
It sounds very bad.
Yeah,
Let's not put too fine a point on it here. It sounds very bad.
Yeah. All right. Thank you much. All right.
Thank you. I want to read some of the texts that have come in. I will speak for everyone and say I'm pretty sure the Mitch thing shows us how much Democrats want to fight. Anything they can do to keep the status quo, even at the expense of their base. I'm so sick and tired of this crap. We're going to be a fascist country because of corporate Democrats. They are the middle managers from hell. That has been a big complaint. That has been a big complaint as we move up to the midterm elections. People are like, oh, my goodness, why are all these Democratic socialists being voted into office? Because it would be nice to have somebody in office that was as responsible to their voters as they are to the big corporate donors that give them tons of money and expect that legislation will either be killed or passed to suit their needs. And people are really, really, really tired of it. I understand that and can't say I disagree with it. Let's go back to the phone line. Steve's on the line from the Gold Coast. Hey, Steve.
Yes, I wanted to say something with regard to the whole Mitch McConnell situation. I mean, I'm wondering whether or not there is anything in Kentucky state law, because we can't rely certainly on anything with regard to federal law enforcement in this day and age going after anyone with regard to perpetrating a fraud or whatnot. So unless Kentucky law exacts some sort of penalty for this, and it's sort of one of those obscure cases, does it even exist? I mean, what is the penalty? So what do you have to lose by lying? So
exactly.
Again,
and frankly, they've got the perfect cover, because if something comes to light, or if, on August 5th, they say, oh, my God, Mitch McConnell, he's taken a turn for the worse. Something terrible happened. He had a stroke. He had a heart attack. And now he's on life support,
Yeah, and assuming then if Mitch McConnell passes away, which he will soon, no matter what are you going to do? I mean, he's a dead man. You can't go after him. And then you have to try and make a case against, and then, of course, that'd be very unpopular. So, yeah, I mean, again, I don't think there's law here. So, and that's the problem. They play between the lines, and this is what you get. And also, I mean, Anthony Fauci, this thing goes back, to 2020. This conspiracy theory has been around. And, they want to link him to some sort of nefarious plot in which we actually funded gain-of-function research, and that somehow translated into COVID becoming what it was, rather than being a natural phenomenon. No one's ever been able to demonstrate it, and even if it were, it has nothing to do with the United States or Anthony Fauci. It's not as if he was in some back room somewhere saying funnel money to China so they could develop this sort of, disease / biological weapon. So I mean, it's just, again, it's a conspiracy theory. Rand Paul's been on board with it, and now he wants to utilize it against Democrats, against Fauci, because there's a following, a conspiracy following online that likes to promote this. But in the end, the right wing is going to promote this tonight by saying, oh, wow, he took the fifth. Oh, as if that somehow is indicative of anything other than realizing that in this day and age and with this Justice Department, these federal law enforcement officials, that's exactly what you should do. Try and stay out of trouble until there's a new administration. Because even if you're not guilty of anything, which the vast majority of people who this administration goes after are not, you still have to spend years in court and resources that you will never recoup fighting these idiots. Because, again, they've weaponized this. And lastly, with regard to inflation, yes, we would all love to be able to go out and buy homes and have a 30-year mortgage at 3%, but that's not how it works. The whole notion of there being a balancing act between inflation and where interest rates are is a delicate balance. And right now you have an economy that is slowing, and you have inflation that is going up. So, we saw that sort of thing in the 70s, stagflation. This is not the time to all of a sudden start lowering interest rates, unless the slowdown is so significant that it overwhelms inflation. But we're not there yet. And that's why, so it's easy to say, or hype up the economy, which is what Donald Trump wants to do, because if you put cheap money out there, then you'll get a lot of people who are going to take advantage of it. And in the short run, it will be there'll be a stimulative effect for the economy. But in the long run, that will be offset by the huge impact that inflation will have.
Yep.
So when your money's not worth as much, that's why the Fed does this job. And that's why we created the Fed, because we don't want politicians making these decisions, because they make them based on short-term political calculus instead of what's long-term.
Exactly.
In the best interest
I mean,
of the
Donald
country.
Trump would love nothing more than for rates to drop significantly right before the midterms. Oh, wouldn't that be great? That would get us some votes. You're absolutely right. Politicians look at what's happening right now and what is best for them in the short term. But hopefully the Fed is looking at the bigger picture and what makes more sense for the long term.
Yeah, that's why so many other countries, so many institutions have flooded this country with their money. They make a lot of things all over the world. We buy them, but we give them their money. You know what they do? They invest it back here. They stick it back here into our economy. Why? Because they know that our numbers are real, that we have integrity, that, when the economy is going south, we report it. When it does better, we report it. We don't manipulate our currency. We don't, again, hide those things that, unlike, say, what happens in China and many other places. But if you undermine that credibility, why does anybody want to come here if we cannot trust the American institutions anymore?
Exactly. And that trust is one of the many things that have eroded under Donald Trump. That trust, our relationships with our allies, our standing in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the call. I want to share this text. You know, the texter before said that they were so tired of corporate Democrats. And April texted in, Joan, I also can't stand corporate Democrats, but please, let's remember that the GOP is the main reason we're in this mess. You're right. Keep your eyes on the big picture, April, because that is exactly right. We have spent too much money on a war we never should have gotten into. And to make up for that, and also the tax cut for the wealthiest folks, to make that up, we are going to punish poor people we're going to reduce or eliminate food benefits. We are going to reduce or eliminate Medicaid reimbursement, et cetera, and so forth. Because that's how they're going to try to balance the budget. They want the rich people to do really, really well, and they want to balance the budget on the backs of the poor in this country. Let's go back to the phone lines. Jeffrey's on the line from Chicago. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you so much for the call today.
Yeah, thank you. I had something to shift your gears. A number of years ago, the state of Florida passed a law that said all new construction had to have hurricane straps or clips that fastened the roof to the main body of the house so that in the event of a hurricane, those roofs would not blow off. Seeing what's going on here with the tornadoes and the heavy winds that Chicago and the rest of the state see, why can't we get the federal government, the state government, the county governments to help fund and offset the cost of installing these clips on every home that needs it? It would save billions of dollars in terms of famous repairs.
That's a really good idea. And even if you felt that some people shouldn't be, like, you know, maybe for the city of Chicago, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But how about if you live in what we all know as Tornado Alley? How about if you live in Tornado Alley? Just like, you know, people who live in floodplains and their area floods like every year, the government finally figured out, you know what, maybe we should offer those people some money. Maybe we should buy their houses, and then maybe we should prohibit anybody from building here in the future. You know, you're exactly right. We've got to start looking at this more practically. You know that you live in Tornado Alley. You know you live in a floodplain. And you should have to take precautions. It seems like it would only make sense to me, Jeffrey.
It does. And, you know, where you know so many politicians, I think it's time that you spread the word to these politicians to get out there and vote to get money so that all these people are not going to lose their homes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Not only that, but it would bring down insurance costs. You know, you have so many insurers who just don't even want to offer policies in a certain area because they know the risks are so high. And if there was something done to maybe lower the risk, then it would be beneficial for everybody.
Sure. Go ask the insurance industry how many times a home gets decimated, and the insurance company either refuses to pay the full amount or cancels the policy altogether.
Exactly. Yep.
And once you're canceled, it's impossible to get a new policy.
Yep. I hear you. You make a lot of sense. Let's hope somebody's listening to us, Jeffrey. Let's hope someone who could do something is listening.
It's a pleasure to always listen to your station.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the call. Somebody texted in, you know, I was talking about Medicare Part D going away. They texted in, Medicare Part D isn't going away. There was a subsidy provided under Joe Biden that's being eliminated by Trump. So higher premiums, but Part D is not eliminated. I hope that's true. That is not what I read this morning. I read, well, was it even on CNN? I can't remember that, you know, it was kiss it goodbye. So I hope you're right. I really hope you are right. about this. Greg from Lake in the Hills wanted me to mention that Glenn Hansard passed away. If you've ever seen the movie or the play Once, which is one of the most beautiful, bittersweet, romantic musicals that this country has produced in the last couple of decades, he passed away. He wrote one of the songs, Falling Slowly, that was a very, very, very big hit. So, Greg, you're right. That's somebody we should honor as Glenn Hansard. By the way, one other little news item before we have to take a break and go to news at the top of the hour. Today was the day that Benjamin Netanyahu was to speak at the United Nations. And in fact, he did speak at the United Nations. And when he was sitting there getting ready, they had one of the largest and strongest political protests of recent times. There was a massive walkout of people who were not going to sit there and listen to a speech by Benjamin Netanyahu. I saw the video of people just filing out of the exits. Netanyahu was sitting. Sitting at this little desk where he was preparing. He kept his head down like he wasn't aware of what was going on around him. But the news reports that I read described it as the strongest political protest at the United Nations in modern times. And on CNN this morning, they were looking at polling. You know, a lot of people don't care for Benjamin Netanyahu and what he is doing. That doesn't mean generally if you should be able to split the difference between if you feel like Israel as a country and then Benjamin Netanyahu as a leader. But CNN had 4 different polls that showed that, generally speaking, the support that existed for Israel in this country is severely eroding. Huge changes in the polling. Most people, a majority of people now saying that they really don't think Israel is doing the right thing. And like I said, that protest at the UN kind of is in that same vein. We're going to take a break for news. We will be back with more after this.
You're the only voice of reason on the radio.
You give me hope.
Having listened to you every day.
Thank you for your clear insight.
Always felt a little bit smarter.
I listen to you every single day.
I keep coming back to this station, and thank you for what you do.
On WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Do you subscribe to our newsletter, Radio Free America? It is written by the lovely Erin Kleinman. It is must-read stuff. And luckily for us, Erin is here to talk about not only what's in the most recent newsletter, but also we have some primaries coming up next week. And Erin and I love to talk about primaries. How you doing, Erin? How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Joan. Busy as always. The news cycle just never stops, huh?
No, it never, ever stops. Let's see. Should we start with the newsletter? Should we start? You know what? Let's start with something I've been harping on since this morning. Andy Beshear and Mitch McConnell. A lot of people in my text line seem to think that Andy Beshear has nothing to lose by saying, you know what? I've not heard from Mitch. There's no proof of life, so I'm going to call a special election. And if Mitch is there and wants to tell me not to do it, I am here for him. What do you think?
I think Andy Beshear right now is doing everything that he can to get Mitch McConnell to be more transparent about his condition. But one thing to keep in mind is that Mitch McConnell not being able to vote in the Senate is a good thing for Democrats.
That's true, but what if they ran that special election, and what if somebody more sympathetic to our side was able to win? You know, even a Thomas Massie would be better than a Mitch McConnell.
Well, we're running out of time for that, because if the vacancy occurs within like a week, I think it's August 3rd might be the deadline, then it just becomes an appointment, which would have to be a Republican under state law. And also Kentucky, even though Bashir won twice as a Democrat, their statewide, non-federal elections are held in off years. It's held the year before the presidential election. So it's more kind of open to, people departing from the partisan norm, because there isn't like that national race on the top of the ticket really driving it. So if you take out the gubernatorial elections, state elections, a Democrat hasn't won statewide in Kentucky in decades. And so it just, even though Republican favorables are very bad right now, it still probably almost certainly would result in another Republican senator from Kentucky. So, to me, it just doesn't seem worth it to try to kind of force it open when again, Republicans are currently down a vote in the Senate. They're going to be down a vote in the Senate, it seems like, through a pretty important legislative period. So I don't get why Andy Bashir would really work hard to change that.
Well, what about the bigger picture? Most of the people who I hear from and who text me, they're really sick of what they refer to as do-nothing Democrats, the ones who speak sternly or write a letter, and if Andy Bashir has any thoughts of running for the Democratic nomination in 2028, don't you think, even if this election wouldn't necessarily go our way, I think if Andy Bashir wants to run, they'll be like, look at you. You knew Mitch McConnell was screwing with you, and you didn't do anything. You said a couple times, oh, call me, but you didn't do anything. What about for Andy Bashir's own personal political future?
Well, it's really interesting you say, I want someone who does something more than write a letter. Well, if he were to try to get that seat vacated and appoint someone in its place, he would literally be writing a letter to the president of the Senate, J.D. Vance, by the way, saying, the state of Kentucky wants to, either hold an election for this seat or appoint this person to this seat. And then J.D. Vance gets to decide whether that letter has the force of law. And if he decides it doesn't, then it goes to court. And so, I'm sure Andy Bashir has thought this through, and
it could become a legal situation. But from what I've read, there was a law passed in Kentucky that said, the governor can't fill the seat. We have to have a special election. But Andy Bashir has gone on the record as saying that law is unconstitutional because it flies in the face of very specific wording in the state constitution. He has said that if he challenged it, if he appointed somebody to that seat and it went to court, which of course it would, he believes he would be victorious.
Yeah, and if the seat is vacant, does become vacant, then he has that option. But he would still need to get a court order showing that he could appoint a Democrat to that seat for it to have the force of law. He can't just miracle a Democrat into that seat tomorrow. He would need for the seat to be vacant. And, right now, under the laws of the United States, and I think the Commonwealth of Kentucky too, not showing up for work as a senator doesn't make the seat vacant. Democrats had their own issue with this with Dianne Feinstein. John Fetterman returned to the Senate after he was.
But we knew where they were. Maybe they weren't on the top of their game, but we knew that they were still alive. If I swear to you, if on August 4th or 5th, the Republicans go, oh my goodness, there's been a terrible tragedy, and Mitch McConnell died overnight, I think Andy Bashir is going to look like a fool.
Well, I think that's just very, very unlikely to happen because, Mitch McConnell was at the George Washington University Hospital. Washington, D.C. is like a 90% Democratic state. If you're a doctor and you don't report that someone died, you can lose your license. You can be subject to criminal charges. I don't think anyone's like endangering their like political career to kind of do a weekend at Bernie's thing for Mitch McConnell. So, he's alive, absent like, I mean, it's almost like impossible to imagine the scenario in which he's like actually dead. I mean, he's probably very sick, very enfeebled, and doesn't want to be on camera, and that's why it seems so uncanny. But he's alive, and so Andy Bashir, hopefully, he has access to the best lawyers in Kentucky. They've probably looked at the state statutes to see if there's a way for him to force this open, and there probably isn't. And so. Now, he kind of just needs to wait. And yeah, maybe Mitch McConnell waits till August 4th, realizes, I'm not making it back to the Senate. Maybe if I resign now, I can help give them back a vote for a little while. But to me, it just seems like Bashir's kind of doing what he should do and calling attention to kind of the cover up here. But like trying to kind of force a legal issue where he ends up looks like he's working in bad faith, or looks like he's actually trying to break the law to install someone into office. That's a really bad, I think that's a really bad thing to do. And so I'm glad he's kind of taking the course that he does. And, I would hope that, that the people, if he runs for president, people would kind of judge him on, hey, he was out there on TV talking about this every day. And, you kind of need to realize
and the second
he's a
part
governor,
of that,
not a miracle worker.
He was out there talking about it every day. And what did he actually do? That would be the second part of that observation, I think.
It's true, but at the same time, people need to realize that, there is only so much that he could do. And that if he tried to actually like get a Democrat into the Senate, first of all, he'd have to go through J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance is never going to do that.
Why can't Andy Bashir say, the state constitution is clear. I have every right to fill this seat. I am going to fill this seat by August 2nd. I'm going to make my announcement as who's filling this seat. That would be the pressure that would be needed for Mitch McConnell to either rise out of his hospital bed or not. I don't see the downside for Bashir. I really, really don't. And let's make a side bet here. I think that by August 10th at the latest, we are going to learn that Mitch McConnell is either on life support or had a terrible stroke or heart attack overnight and happens to be dead. What do you think? Come on. I'll bet you a dollar.
You know what? I think the next. I think that my next appearance on the show might be August 10th. So I'm ready for that.
Okay. All right.
Let's do it, Joan.
All right.
Yeah. And just again, further to your point, again, the issue is that he doesn't have, like, a lot of the time when people want Democrats to do something, it's like actually using their office for something that's like achievable. Like, when they got really mad in 2025 at Chuck Schumer for caving on a funding bill and not filibustering it, because I think in early 2025, I think the Democratic Party had really misread how popular Trump really was, and they were still staggering around after 2024. That, I think, was like a valid complaint that, Senate Democrats were not using the power the way that they should have to kind of stand up to Trump back then. And I think even things around impeachment and impeaching Trump officials, that you can make a valid case that Congress has the constitutional ability to force these issues to the fore and make it something. But Bashir, again, because J.D. Vance is the gatekeeper here, because the president of the Senate determines the validity of any letter he gets, ultimately asking him to do something is basically asking him to send a letter to J.D. Vance that J.D. Vance throws into the trash next to his old copy of Mein Kampf because he has a new one now. So,
well, don't send a letter to J.D. Vance, just act. Let's put it this way. If Mitch McConnell were the governor of Kentucky and this Andy Bashir was AWOL, what do you think Mitch McConnell would do? Mitch McConnell, who used every loophole, who put every law to the test to get what he wanted, regardless of morals or ethics or laws sometimes. What do you think Mitch McConnell would do?
I think he'd be doing exactly what Andy Bashir is doing and trying to ratchet up public pressure and going on all the national networks. By the way, in Kentucky, the story is playing out kind of differently, where the story in Kentucky is that Mitch McConnell's AWOL and we're all trying to figure out what's going on here. So, like in Kentucky, and the people there kind of understand the law because it's been in the news. And so they understand that there's very little that Bashir can do. So like people in his home state think he's doing all that he can. And so, I think that he's actually kind of, maybe he's not like kind of the showiest guy, and he would admit that he's not the showiest guy. But, if he tried to make a spectacle out of this, he would probably just embarrass himself, and he wouldn't force. If anything, he kind of would give the moral high ground to McConnell, because if he is really convalescing, all of a sudden it's like, I'm just trying to feel better. Does Andy Bashir really think that, he can treat people like this? He's breaking the law. And then, by the way, the Kentucky legislature has a Republican supermajority, and they could impeach Andy Bashir if they think that he's trying to break the law. And so without a court order to the effect that he can do this, is just, anything that he would do would be a dead letter.
Aaron Kleinman standing his ground no matter how many different ways I try to push him around. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Heartland Signal senior political reporter Aaron Kleinman is here. Sign up for his newsletter, Radio Free America. You can sign up for it at heartlandsignal.com. We have a lot of primaries coming up next week. Should we start with Michigan?
That's the big one. Let's do it. The Senate race. Have you been paying attention to that Senate race, Joan?
Yes, I have. And I think it's, if people are looking at it like it's going to be some kind of litmus election on whether or not, progressives can continue to win seats. Do you think that's fair?
Every race is kind of, I do think that this would be kind of a watershed race, because in purple states for the last 2 decades, I would say, give or take, Democrats have very, very rarely gone with someone who identifies themselves as the leftist candidate in the primary. If you look at Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, which, by the way, they have another big one coming up there too, Arizona, North Carolina, the left-wing candidate has not, rarely succeeds in these statewide primaries because voters, they get worried about electability. But Abdul El Sayed is trying to stop that streak. And, he's a very compelling candidate. He has a number of things going for him. One is that, if you watch him, he is just very, very good on camera. And he's obviously he's a Rhodes Scholar. He's an incredibly intelligent guy. He's an incredibly accomplished guy. He's one of those guys. And also he's almost a perfect candidate because he has no skeletons in his closet. He's married to his college sweetheart. He I don't think he's ever gotten a parking ticket, one of those people. And so,
I don't know anyone like that.
Yeah. So, he's kind of almost a perfect type of candidate. But, he has, and also in Michigan, he is a Muslim. Michigan has a significant Muslim population. He has a view on the conflict in the Middle East, in Israel, that is probably more in line with the Democratic primary electorate than his opponent, Haley Stevens. But also he can point to the fact that hey, we lost a lot of votes in the Dearborn area in 2024 because of the Democratic nominee's views on this issue. So, maybe you can try with me. And then, so that might be hitting a little differently, so to speak. So, but also, I don't want to discount his opponent, Haley Stevens, who I feel like I always have to disclose. I went to college with her. I donated to her first campaign. I like her personally. And, she also, she has a very strong Michigan accent, and as someone who's known her for decades, I can tell you that's not an act. Like, that's how she sounded back in like 2003 as well. Like if that's an act, then she's like, it's like The Prestige, where she's just been like putting on an act her entire life. And she also has a very kind of impressive resume. She worked on the auto rescue, which is a big deal in Michigan. She also she's from the state originally, like Abdul El Sayed. Kind of an ironic thing where like he actually kind of grew up in the more kind of upper middle class area. She grew up in a more middle class area. Her parents were teachers. I think that's what I remember from 2 decades ago. So I might be wrong on that one. But so she's like a middle class kid from the Detroit suburbs, like him. Maybe didn't grow up with as much, but again, 2 kind of very qualified candidates. And right now, the balance of the polling we have seems to indicate that El Sayed is in the lead, but Michigan pollsters, there are just a lot of bad ones, so it's always tough to tell there. and then they've looked at kind of some polls for the general election, and there have been some polls showing that they poll about the same against the likely Republican nominee, Mike Rogers. But one recently came out that showed that she would be up like 1 or 2 points and he would be down around 10 points. And so that kind of put some fear into some people. But again, polling Michigan, like there are just so many bad ones, it's always tough to tell. So yeah, all of these things are converging. And then again, I kind of touched on the Middle East issue, but Stevens very pro-Israel, and PACs affiliated with AIPAC have spent a lot of money in this race. And, AIPAC has not had a great record in primaries this cycle. And so they're kind of trying to break their losing streak here a little bit. So all of these things are converging on the state of Michigan. And if you are listening to us from Michigan, I am so sorry you have not been able to watch TV without not wall-to-wall political ads. But hey, it's going to be like this through November too.
The Guardian has an article about how their title, Apex brand has become toxic. Can this pro-Israel, pro-peace rival move in? It's called J Street is apparently the new thing. And I don't know. This is like the first that I'm hearing about it. I want to find out what J Street is about. But have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah. J Street has been pitching itself as the alternative to AIPAC for a very long time, like for decades now. But AIPAC has become so kind of, toxic in Democratic primaries. People may be looking for a different, way to promote, Zionism. And I think, this kind of gets to the core of the issue here, where a lot of pro-Israel people are treating this like a comms issue, where it's like, oh, if we just scream more about how there isn't a genocide, if we just say different things, if we accuse our opponents of being anti-Semitic, if we keep if we just kind of communicate through a different PAC or put a different name on the mailers, that can solve our issues. And the problem is that that's not the case. The problem is that people really have substantive disagreements with how the state of Israel is conducting policy against Palestinians. And until you can change the substance of that, there's only so much that changing your branding can do. And I would say, you know what? Because the ads that all these pro-Israel forces put in races, they tend not to actually touch on Israel. They tend to attack people on entirely different things. And it's like, if you want to actually build support for the state of Israel, start making the case in those ads if you're going to spend that much money on those. Hey, make the case that that El Sayed, in kind of aligning himself with Hassan Piker, is aligning himself with Hamas, which is actually destructive to the Palestinian people. Argue that Haley Stevens, just because she supports Zionism doesn't mean that she doesn't believe that Israelis and Palestinians don't want to live in peace someday. I feel like on this issue, we have really lost that idea, especially within the Democratic coalition. I would say that most people within the Democratic coalition want a peaceful Israeli state where Palestinians have civil rights. I think that almost everyone in our tent thinks that. I think there are some very few people who don't think Israel has the right to exist, and you got to live without them. And then there are probably some people who don't think that Palestinians deserve any rights, and you're going to have to start learning to live without them as well. But I feel like, a group like J Street hopefully can kind of build toward a consensus and build toward kind of, there needs to be a level of mutual respect between people within the Democratic coalition, especially in a state like Michigan, where you have high Arab and Jewish populations, where you kind of need to go back to like, hey, we all want the same thing here. We need to stop kind of calling each other names and focus on what we have in common.
Aaron, we need to take a break. I'm talking with Aaron Kleinman, senior political reporter for Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com. We will be right back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You should sign up for the newsletter, Radio Free America. Aaron Kleinman puts it out every week. You can sign up at heartlandsignal.com. Before we move off of Michigan, real quick, I just started reading about Michigan's 7th congressional district, the race there. I thought it caught my eye because one of the people running used to be the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, a woman by the name of Bridget Brink, which I thought was really, really fascinating. What can you tell me about that race?
Yeah, so you have, I think, 2 candidates in that race who have a very compelling story to tell and one who does not. So you have Bridget Brink, who really was on the front lines of kind of the war against, unchecked aggression from Russia. And so she really just brings a wealth of foreign policy experience into that race. You also have Matt, one of her opponents is a guy named Matt Mounsum. He's a guy who carried the nuclear football. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes.
Yeah. So he, again, former Navy SEAL, so you have these 2 candidates in that race who bring kind of similar foreign policy credentials and credibility around that and defense, and could really be helpful in a swing district that, Alyssa Slotkin held it before she ran for Senate. Now a Republican holds it, and Democrats are trying to flip it back. And it's really one of their key pickup opportunities. But there's a 3rd candidate in this race who I'm very worried about, and I talked about in my newsletter. His name is Will Lawrence. And my main concern with him is that he founded a group called the Sunrise Movement. Are you familiar with the Sunrise Movement?
Yeah, that's wasn't that associated with Bernie Sanders, or am I conflating 2 different groups?
It was actually. So it was supposed to be kind of like a main climate group. And I talked to people who were working for different campaigns in 2020, and they really did not like the Sunrise Movement because they thought, they tried to treat them seriously. Like, hey, this is a youth-driven climate group. We're going to send you our climate plans. And basically all of them got the cold shoulder except for Bernie. And they're like, okay, these guys have just been in the tank for Bernie the whole time. And I think they rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But then after that, it's, it keeps getting worse because they were really focused on just like media stunts, like doing a sit-in in Joe Manchin's office and like screaming at him as he walked to his car. That things that didn't do anything. And so you look at kind of the Inflation Reduction Act, the bill that actually passed and that actually did help lower carbon emissions. It looked nothing like the bill that Sunrise Movement wanted. They lost the argument on climate because what they really wanted to do is kind of have a more degrowth, like basically forcing people to have less to achieve climate goals, whereas the IRA was more focused on, kind of creating more sources of renewable energy, but not forcing people to go with less.
Mm-hmm.
So they lost the argument there. And then since then, they become increasingly like erratic as a group. They seem to kind of blame Democrats for everything, even things that Trump does. Like the example, like on Twitter, they blamed high gas prices on Democrats working with Exxon when that is not at all what happened. In fact, we have polls out today showing that vast majority of people understand that high gas prices are a function of Trump attacking Iran. And so it's this group where it's kind of become almost unmoored from reality. And Will Lawrence founded this group.
Oh, boy.
And so and he's right. Like he has like Indivisible endorsed him. He has a lot of kind of left-wing endorsements. I worry that the 2 other candidates in this race could split kind of, the vote for people who kind of don't like this type of stuff, and he becomes the nominee, and and then he's tied to this group. And again, before I came here to Heartland, I worked in the political world. We looked at kind of what made a good candidate, And, ideology definitely helps. Like, we saw that like moderation, will get you a few points. And in a purple state and a purple race, that really does it. But like what really, really helps, the most important thing to look for in a candidate is like someone who has authentic local ties to their seat. Again, the two opponents here maybe don't have that as much, but like Lawrence, he's kind of running from like one of the worst positions because people really, in our research, they found that people really didn't like candidates who came from like the nonprofit world. Because I think that people who worked at nonprofits, because when you work at a nonprofit, so much of your job is just asking rich people for money. And
which is a lot like politics.
Exactly. That reminds people what they don't like about politics. Yeah, and so when you think about like what makes a good candidate, for example, in Wisconsin right now in the gubernatorial primary, the front runner is someone who's been affiliated with the DSA, Francesca Hong, and people are really worried about her as potential nominee. And I'm actually kind of like a little more sanguine about it. She does seem to kind of realize that maybe some DSA positions just like don't work with the broader voting public.
Isn't she the front runner right now in the primary?
She is the front runner.
I thought I saw some polling on that.
Yeah, she's the front runner right now. But also, like, her background is that, she grew up in Madison. She went to high school there. She went to college there. She dropped out of college to start a restaurant. And that's like a local business. And people love it, candidates whose kind of financial well-being is tied to the local community. So, people love going for like, oh, we're going to recruit, again, like, national defense, foreign policy people. Those are always seen as like great recruits, but it's like, the Leslie Knope would be a fantastic local candidate. I'm serious, because like people who work for local government, not just like policemen, firemen, but like, like local parks administrators. There's someone like one of the top performing candidates we saw was like literally worked for like, the Department of Sanitation. And it's just, if someone like, you can tell they care about the community, you can tell that their well-being, like their own personal well-being is tied to the community. That's really what makes a good candidate. And then Lawrence, because he's just spent his life in the nonprofit world, doesn't have that. It can really kind of cost you in the general. We found that like, it doesn't make as much of a difference whether you worked in like, so like foreign policy, national security, that doesn't make as much of a difference. Also, we were kind of looking more at state races where it just doesn't factor in as much, but we just found that like nonprofit workers is just not a good profile for a candidate.
Yeah. On Monday, I'm talking to Pat Kreitlow. He founded and writes the Up North News for the Courier newsroom chain. And the governor's race is number one on my list of things to talk about, because he's been following those races very closely. I think it's really, really fascinating. Let's talk about another one of the, now that I've wasted 2/3 of your time. Let's squeeze in all the other primaries.
I don't go to your house, tell you how to decorate everything, Joe. This is your place. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about.
I wish all men felt that way, but that's an issue for another day. Let's talk about Kansas.
Yeah. So Kansas, there's a couple of things on the ballot there. Kansas Republicans have been constantly incensed by the fact that their Supreme Court stands up for reproductive rights. It's just, and so right after Dobbs, they tried to, during the primary, pass a bill that would, or pass kind of like a constitutional amendment, I think, that would do away with the Supreme Court precedent supporting reproductive rights. It failed. So now what are they going to try to do? They're going to say, we're going to make it so that the Supreme Court's no longer appointed. It's going to be elected in partisan elections. Well, who do you think that favors in Kansas? Probably the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, so they're going to try to elect Republicans to the state Supreme Court, and they're going to try to do away with reproductive rights protections in Kansas. So that's the thing to look out for there. And then also you do have a Democratic primary for Senate. Kansas, it's been a very Republican state for a very long time. I think they have the longest streak of electing Republicans to the Senate, going back, I like literal decades. I forget, it was like maybe the 40s the last time a Democrat won a Senate seat there. But again, we've seen stories about Republicans really struggling to motivate their voters. Gas prices and fertilizer prices going up have really hurt farm states. So maybe the Democrats have an outside chance here. And the front runner in that primary, he's a pastor of one of the largest churches in the Kansas City area, Adam Hamilton. He's probably the favorite heading into next Tuesday. And so, if he wins, he kind of, could present a nice contrast with the current incumbent, Roger Marshall, who has a tendency to say loony stuff sometimes. So, keep an eye on that one.
Okay. Unbelievable. Things that would have disqualified people, 15 years ago. Now it's just, oh, yeah, he says loony stuff.Moving on, I mean, that seems to be the world we live in these days. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have two more states that I want to hit. Why don't we take a break right now? Aaron Kleinman is here, senior political reporter for Heartland Signal. We'll be right back after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
You should be signed up for Radio Free America, the newsletter that Aaron Kleinman puts out once a week. You can sign up for it at heartlandsignal.com. We are here talking about the primaries that are coming up. Are they all August 4th?
There are a bunch on August 4th, and then Wisconsin's August 11th. So, that'll be an exciting one as well, as we mentioned earlier. And in Minnesota as well.
On August 11th or the 4th?
No, Minnesota's on the 11th along with Wisconsin.
Okay. Well, good. Yeah, I've got Wisconsin primary written down because Wisconsin is such an interesting state. But that's not what we're here to talk about right now. We're here to talk about Missouri, Virginia, West Virginia, West Virginia? What?
Washington.
Virginia, Washington?
Yeah, Washington. Okay. And then, so Washington's a really interesting one because Washington doesn't actually have party primaries. They have the top two system where the top two finishers in a race will advance to the general election. And so there you had in one district, there's a Congressman, Adam Smith. He's been there for a very long time, I think 30 years now. But he was pretty young when he was first elected, so he's still with it. But he's attracted some, left-wing challengers. And one of them was actually, she looked like she might have some legs there. But then she went to an interview with the Alt Weekly there, The Stranger. And she forgot to say she was off the record and was telling them about how she was going to switch to the Green Party if she got elected. So that kind of kiboshed her whole effort there. So that was kind of the big news out of Washington.
If you're in a Republican state, she's not the first candidate I've heard, at least to contemplate that kind of thing, because you want somebody who's not a Republican to get elected. And if the Democrat really doesn't have a chance, but there's an independent, why it seems to me that it would make strategic sense for the Democrat to drop out and throw their support behind the independent.
Well, this is a very Democratic seat. But actually, no, but there has been a bunch of that going around. Did you see in Idaho, for example, the Democratic nominee dropped out and backed an independent running for Senate there. Idaho, another state that hasn't elected a Democrat to the Senate in decades. And then in Montana, it's really, and so in Montana, you also have something similar trying to happen. Where you have an independent, Seth Bodnar, running against a Democrat and a Republican. And the Republican, by the way, nobody really knows the guy because the incumbent senator dropped out right at the filing deadline and had his friend file in his place. So it's I know in Illinois, you've seen that a few times.
Yeah, it doesn't make us happy. It makes us very unhappy.
It doesn't make anyone happy. And so, but still, Montana's trended very Republican. The people moving to the state have been pretty Republican, as it turns out. John Tester couldn't win there anymore. So, he's backing this independent, but the Democrat won't drop out. And then today, the Republican Secretary of State said, even if the Democrat does drop out, I'm going to force the party to replace her on the ballot with someone else. You can't just not have a Democrat on the ballot here. So there's a lot of kind of upheaval in Montana right now. So we'll see if they can pull that off. And then the last state where they're trying this is in Nebraska, where Dan Osborne is running for Senate there as an independent. There's no Democrat on the ballot. He actually came within, I think, 6 points in 2024. and 2026, the electorate should be at least 6 points better than it was in 2024. So he actually has a decent chance there. And in this week's newsletter, you can see his new, I don't want to call it an ad because it's really just kind of a video he made online, but he loves Nebraska so much that he's not only visiting every county in the state, but in the video, he recites all 93 counties in alphabetical order just to show everyone how much he loves it. And I would love if someone from, running statewide in Illinois, for example, if anyone can name all the counties in Illinois in their ad, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't you love J.B. Pritzker to do that himself?
I was just thinking, how many counties I could name, and I could name at least 3 in Illinois. At least 3.
Yeah. Well, we just heard the ad for the McHenry County Fair. Patty Vasquez is going to be there on my birthday, August 7th. So everyone check it out.
She's doing it to honor you.
Oh, thank you, Patty.
Yeah.
Sadly, I won't be there. But everyone check out the McHenry County Fair on August 7th. And
are you going to be in McHenry County in any time in September? Because it looks like September 15th. I'm going to be doing my show from McHenry County. I'd love to talk to you in person. Can you come schedule a family visit?
I'll have to talk to the guy, but if I do it, I'll have to memorize every single county in Illinois so I can recite them on stage.
I won't hold you to it.
So, but also McHenry County again. It's one of those places in this election where, historically McHenry County was one of the most Republican parts of the state, and now all of a sudden it's trending bluer and bluer and bluer. So it's good to kind of get out there and really kind of engage with people in all these, all these different places. And I think in general, what Osborne's doing, and just if you take people seriously, they live where they live for a reason. They care about where they live. They want the place where they live to be better. And if you're willing to meet them where they are, even if they don't agree with you on much, it's still kind of, it loosens the ground a little bit. McHenry County didn't turn blue overnight. It's you have to put in the effort in these places. And so I really appreciate Osborne going there and just being like, hey, Pete Ricketts, again, you here in Illinois know plenty about Pete Ricketts.
We don't like those Ricketts people very much, except for the sister. We like the sister.
The sister is great. We love the sister. And he's like, hey, this Ricketts guy, really more of an Illinois person, if you ask me. He only cares about, the eastern part of the state, the wealthiest part of the state. But he's going to go to every single corner of Nebraska and just hear people out. And, it's a great tactic. And I think, again, people, they want candidates who care about where they're from, who are invested in where they're from, who want to make where they're from a better place. And so if you just keep running candidates like that, it's a recipe for success.
Well, I'd love a recipe for success. That's really important. Let's talk about Washington.
Yeah, Washington, that was the one where the candidate was lying about being a Democrat.
Oh, do we have nothing else to add about Washington? I thought maybe there was more.
Really. It's Washington's been pretty blue. They don't have a gubernatorial election. I don't think they have a Senate election, but it's Washington's been pretty blue. But the other states there, Virginia. Unfortunately, in Virginia, we thought we would have a bunch of really exciting primaries because they were able to redraw the map, but then their state Supreme Court decided we just love Trump too much to let that map stand. So not a ton of action in Virginia. And then I think Missouri was the other one that we mentioned. And Missouri is another state where they're trying to kind of get a constitutional amendment through. This would make it harder to pass ballot initiatives. Because in
we
Missouri,
don't want those pesky citizens being involved in their government.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, and in Missouri too, again, that's a state that's brutally gerrymandered. They might even try to get rid of the last Democratic seat. And, they went from 6-2 to now it's probably going to be 7-1. And then they might try to get rid of that one now that the VRA is gone because they'll try to crack the city of St. Louis potentially. But in that primary, you have Wesley Bell, the incumbent congressman, going up against Cori Bush, who he defeated back in 2024. Bush kind of burned a lot of bridges, wasn't always the easiest person to work with. Maybe it's a different moment for her just because, one of the biggest issues in that 2024 race was AIPAC did weigh in heavily against her.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe she's trying to turn that into a negative for Bell, but it kind of doesn't paper over her own problems as a candidate. So Bell is probably favored there. If he loses, that's probably a really bad sign. And it probably means that if Bell loses, it means Haley Stevens probably losing too, because it means that Democratic voters really do not like AIPAC getting involved in their races.
I have a question that is political, but has nothing to do with primaries. Just this morning, I was reading some article about, there was a headline about Rahm Emanuel and J.B. Pritzker, which of course caught my eye. And in the course of the article, it was talking about, how the ways in which they are different. But it said both of them, Rahm and J.B., both have very, very little chance of actually being on the ballot in 2028. And I was like, really? Maybe Rahm. I've always said I don't really understand what Rahm is doing because I don't think even anybody would have him on the ticket as their VP. But J.B. Pritzker, I kind of thought that he had a better shot than very, very little chance. What do you think?
Well, I apologize. There's a very noisy ambulance outside where I'm broadcasting from. Can you hear that?
We cannot.
Okay,
I only hear dogs barking when people have dogs in their house. Any other noises? Or if people, sometimes I interview people who are actually cooking dinner and you can hear the pots and pans and the water running and putting, and I want to just say, oh, by the way, do you know we can hear all that? But no, what I said was I read this morning an article about Rahm Emanuel and J.B. Pritzker, and the article put them both in the same boat, that neither of them basically have a chance, or there's only a very, very, very slim chance that they would be on the ballot in 2028. And for Rahm, okay, but for JB, I kind of thought, well, that's interesting.
It does seem like, I think that article is probably too caught up in news cycles because J.B. Pritzker has not been in the national news very much recently. The reason why, of course, is that he is the governor of Illinois, a large, economically diverse state, and the state of Illinois needs a budget. And so he's been busy passing the budget in Illinois. And so he doesn't have time to go on like the Sunday shows. He doesn't have time to, kind of hype up his candidacy, but he still has a lot of people that support him and think he'd be a great president. But I will say, I think that Jon Ossoff has kind of stolen a bit of his thunder. Jon Ossoff has been the guy who's really kind of making a clear, convincing case against corruption and in a way that J.B. Pritzker used to kind of throw those punches against Trump. And so I think that maybe Ossoff, and I don't pay too much attention to the betting markets, but they seem to think that Ossoff is kind of the best kind of Harris, Buttigieg, Newsom candidate right now. And so it does seem like maybe Pritzker, just because of the fact that he has to run the state of Illinois, has kind of lost a bit of his national lightning, so to speak.
Well, I saw an interview that Jen Psaki did, now current MS Now host, but used to be doing comms during the Biden administration. And somebody a long time ago was asking her, what she thought about, who front runners in the presidential election. And she said, in my experience, something always happens. Usually maybe late August or September, there'll be some huge thing that happens, and that's the thing that affects people and what they take with them when they go into the voting booth. So like if you're trying in June to figure out, where all the candidates rank, she kind of said, forget about it until it gets closer. And we see, because she said it happens every time. There'll be, whether it's maybe early October, September, end of August, there will be some really big news story, and that will greatly affect people and how they think about the candidates.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also, I think that polling right now on those races, just the opinions that people have are very loosely held. I think, like I said, Harris, Newsom, Buttigieg, and maybe AOC as well, but I'll leave her to the side for now. Like those three, they have the most name recs. So they're kind of leading all of those. But like, I don't think people really feel that strongly about all of them. And I think if they start learning about other candidates, they probably want to leave the past in the past, is what I'm thinking. What you're seeing in Democratic primaries across the country right now is that people really want to turn the page and they want a new face. And those three candidates are not new faces. And, you even saw like this week, there was Gavin Newsom, a story about how his campaign manager's wife, who he slept with while they were still married, she had, she's written about the experience. And, it's just, why would you kind of chance the 2028 election on someone who's going to have stories like that keep dribbling out?
Well, I also think that there are many states in the country that look askance at anything that comes out of California. And also the fact that he has almost like matinee idol good looks, I'm not sure that's a plus for him too. He seems the looks and everything and the way of speaking. I think a lot of people would think that it was like too packaged, almost too polished. Less not authentic. Oh, I love that word, authentic. I can see where Ossoff would be somebody who would be seriously considered.
Yeah. Again, and I mean, he's a fresh face. They don't get much fresher than that. He's younger than me.
Well, then he's a baby.
He's a baby. I know he's barely eligible to run, but I think people are going to want, the 2026 primaries to me are telling me that in 2028, Democrats are going to want a new face. And so I think it really is wide open. But, he's been able to really kind of break through so far. But it's like Jen Psaki said, it's still really early. There's still a lot of things that could happen. Even for the 2026 election, we still have 3+ more months in this thing, and who knows what's going to happen before then. And especially because Republicans' numbers just keep getting worse right now. Trump's hitting his lows in polling. I saw polls for the Democratic generic congressional ballot, which is kind of overall how people are going to vote. The latest one has them up 8 to 10 points, which means that they're winning the House and that they have a chance at the Senate. So, it's still pretty early, but, so J.B. Pritzker, don't count him out just because he's been out of the news because he's had to hunker down in Springfield for a while.
All righty. Aaron Kleinman, always a pleasure to chat with you. Aaron is our senior political reporter for Heartland Signal. He also does a weekly newsletter, Radio Free America. You can go to heartlandsignal.com and sign up for it. It comes out on Friday, is that right? Or am I confused?
Thursday. We try to do it Thursday in your inbox, Friday on the website. That's the goal. Okay. And I think we're going to do it this week. But yeah, this week it's going to be, if you liked our discussion at the top of the hour, you're going to love the news week.
Well, I love the fact that, it's so hard for me to stay on top of all the different primaries and also the war in Iran and also 1,000 other things that I try to stay on top of. So thank you. Thank you for helping me out with that.
Oh, my pleasure, Joan. And thanks for having me on air. I love joining.
We are going to take a break for news and be back with much more after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
Professor Jane Kirtley is the professor of media ethics and law emerita at the University of Minnesota. She's also a former executive director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Welcome back to our program, Jane. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
One of the things, there's so many things that I want to talk to you about. Especially, I just read this morning, I thought this was all done. E. Jean Carroll was given the check. Hopefully she's cashed it, paid her lawyer. But Donald Trump, for two things, he wants to go to the Supreme Court so that they can say that his executive order to cancel mail-in balloting is fine, and he wants the Supreme Court to say that he needs that money back. He needs some of this money back from E. Jean Carroll, because in addition, of course, to the $5 million or $3.5 million or whatever it was that she got, there's another $83 million hanging in the balance when he couldn't shut up and they went back to court and got a much bigger judgment against him. What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, I can't tell you what's going to happen with the mail-in ballots, but I will say that I am a little anxious about his petition regarding the E. Jean Carroll Award because of the two ways he's approaching it. I mean, one is that he's claiming that this was part of his official duties and that therefore...
To defame her? That was part of his official duties, to defame her, just so we're clear.
Yes, yeah, I know. No, this was, from when he was doing his public relations campaign about how awful she was, how he was not attracted to her, all that kind of stuff, which he was doing during his first term in office. And he's trying to claim that this is part of his official duties, that therefore it is subject to the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court. And what's more, he wants to have the defendant switched to the U.S. government rather than him, which is a neat trick because the U.S. government cannot be sued for defamation. So if they were to agree to this, they would not only be, not that they've never done it before, but they would not only be reversing precedent, they would be doing something that is just beyond bizarre. The last thing that concerns me about it is that it is possible, although I think unlikely in this particular case, that this could become a vehicle to caused the court to reconsider the New York Times versus Sullivan actual malice standard from 1964, which both Justices Thomas and Gorsuch have indicated they would like to do. However, the way Trump is framing this, I really don't think that even if they wanted to do it, they could use that, this case as it is situated as a way to do that, because he's not really contesting the ruling in terms of his liability. He's saying, I'm the wrong defendant. As Donald Trump president, I can't be sued. So who you need to be suing is the U.S. government, which can't be sued for defamation. I mean, I feel like I'm going through the looking glass here because these arguments are so bizarre.
Yeah. Well, the Supreme Court will do that to you. That's for sure. And I've said the Supreme Court should take a step back and look at the big picture, because the more they are out of step with the people of this country, the more likely it is that the voters of this country are going to support Supreme Court reforms, term limits, age limits, staggering the appointments as opposed to waiting for somebody to die. Every president gets one. I realize that they have lifetime appointments and they are extremely powerful. But I think if they continue on with things that just enrage people, I think they're planting the seeds of their own destruction. That's my thought.
Well, I can't disagree with that assessment because, back when I was in law school millennia ago, we always used to talk about the politicization of the Supreme Court and how one of the reality was that in most instances, justices that were appointed by a particular president with an expectation that they were going to do something or pursue a particular viewpoint, it often didn't transpire that way because the lifetime appointment made them sufficiently independent they could say, I'm going to do what I want. Or sometimes their thinking would evolve or whatever. So famously, presidents have said, this nominee didn't do what I wanted them to do. So I'm not trying to suggest it's never had a political aspect to it. But what's happened under the Roberts Court, I think, is a departure that is unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. And the fact that they have shown themselves willing to not only have these expansive rulings in favor of President Trump, and let's be clear, they're of him, not of the presidency per se, and then their willingness to reverse precedent, like Roe v. Wade, and could New York Times v. Sullivan be next? All of those things, I think, are very unsettling to the public because it tells you that the idea of respect for precedent, stare decisis, all that stuff, it doesn't really mean anything to this court, or at least not the conservative majority.
I have to switch gears a little bit. You're the former executive director of the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press, which is an organization, I want to point out, that is completely separate from the White House Correspondents Association. But you study ethics. A lot of people are saying that the White House Correspondent Dinner should not be held. The New York Times famously doesn't buy a table because they don't think that, rubbing shoulders with the people that you're supposed to be writing about is a smart thing to do. And this, of course, this last White House dinner really drew a lot of attention because, it was supposed to be about freedom of the press, and they allowed the president, who is probably enemy number one of freedom of the press, to be there and to speak. What do you think? Do you think the White House Correspondents' Dinner should be done away with?
As it has evolved, yes, I do. When I was in Washington, I had people on my board who were, bureau chiefs for like the Los Angeles Times, and they were movers and shakers, and they played tennis with people in the government. And I always kind of looked askance at that, and I never did that myself as a director of the Reporters Committee. It didn't seem to be appropriate to do because we were suing the government not infrequently over things like freedom of information, and I thought it was important to maintain that distance. You don't have to be hostile, but you're just not going to play tennis with them. I think the White House Correspondents' Dinner has clearly outlived whatever usefulness, I should say, that it had because of President Trump's attitude. And the fact that they let him rant and rave for, 45 minutes with all of these untrammeled attacks on not just the press as an institution, but individuals as well. We know President Trump follows no known norms, and I guess the press is not exempt from that. But to host him in that way, it just seems to me it's no longer appropriate if it ever was. And I certainly did not support the White House Correspondents' Dinner 2.0 that they had, and my worst expectations were met.
Yeah. Well, I can remember many years ago, it seemed to me that the whole point of the White House Correspondents' Dinner was to invite some like A-list celebrities from Hollywood to sit at your table. Ooh, Sharon Stone is going to join us. Margot Robbie is going to be at our table. And that seemed sort of like harmless fun. It doesn't seem that way anymore.
It is one of a couple of press institutions that are referred to as the nerd prom because of the idea that Washington correspondents are not always particularly glamorous people, but they're like anybody else. They like to rub shoulders with people that are. And, again, that kind of thing just gives me the creeps, but that's probably because I'm a simple country girl from Indianapolis, and what do I know? But I honestly think that it's easy for me to say it. I wasn't there. But if I had been there and the president had gone off on his riff about the news media and particular journalists, I would have left. I would have walked out. Because although having lived in Washington for 18 years, I do respect institutions. I think it's impossible to respect someone like that who goes to an event like this, goes with a script that somebody wrote for him that would have been in keeping with the normal practice, and went off script and went into these personal attacks. So to me, there's no reason to have this event anymore.
And one of the people that he attacked that night and seems particularly fixated on attacking is CNN's Caitlin Collins, who I think is an extraordinary reporter. I mean, I remember when she first got hired, and her first job out of college, she worked for some really, I can't remember if it was the Daily Caller or it was some really right-wing sort of outlet. And I was like, oh my God, what's CNN doing? But she has proven to be one of the most disciplined, tenacious journalists that I have ever seen in the White House, or frankly, in any area where we do regular reporting. I think she's amazing. Did you see the interview she did with Jon Stewart?
No, I didn't. Sorry, I've been out.
Well, he asked her, it was like, he asked her, like, this is a man who says terrible things about you. He says terrible things to your face. How do you not react to that? And I thought she gave the absolute perfect answer. She said that when she asks a question, even if he doesn't answer it, she wants the question. She wants people to think about that question. Oh, yeah, why did you do that? Or why did this happen? And she said, if I react to him, then it becomes about him and me and not whatever issue it is I'm trying to get to the bottom of. She said, that's why I don't react. That's why, because I don't want to, make the story, oh, did you see, how she frowned or, burst into tears or whatever. And I thought that was brilliant and exactly what you would want in a journalist.
I would only agree. I think, the whole issue going back a long time is should the journalist become the story? Mm-hmm. And once upon a time, the conventional wisdom was no, it's not about me. Now that can backfire in weird ways. Journalist is not granted access, or a Freedom of Information Act request is not granted. They say, oh, it's now about me. I can't write the story. No, in those instances, it's about you're being denied the information you need for the public. So it's still a matter of public interest. But I agree, these kind of personal confrontations that Trump revels in, whether it was that example or calling the other reporter, quiet piggy, all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. He does it mostly to women. I have to point that out. Mm-hmm. And I think he is very threatened, or appears to be, by strong, determined, smart women. He's been displaying that for a long time. But I would agree, her answer is exactly what I would advise anybody to do, because ultimately, if he doesn't answer the question, that's a telling story. And there have been those who have said that a really good practice among the White House press corps would be that if he doesn't answer somebody's question, the next reporter should ask the question again, and the next reporter should ask the question again. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody is going to agree to anything that formal, but I do think that demanding an answer, or at least reporting the fact that he won't answer, is just as important as saying whatever it is that he does respond with.
There was a longtime television political reporter by the name of Dick Kay, who spent many years after he retired doing a political show here on the radio. And he used to tell stories about how in the earlier days, decades ago, like younger Rich Daley's administration, he said there used to be sort of a camaraderie that way, that if somebody stood up and asked a question, if Richie Daley didn't want to answer your question, he would just ignore you and like, next, And he said there was a time when the reporters in Chicago would do that. If he didn't answer the question, the next reporter would ask it, and the next reporter would ask it, to keep the ball in the mayor's court. But even in local news, Dick said, that wasn't something that happened anymore. And we need to take a break, but I want to keep talking about this because there have been a lot of criticism from about other White House reporters. Why does nobody come to any of these female reporters' side? Nobody sticks up for them when it's like, Piggy, or the horrible things he says about Caitlin Collins. She never smiles. Have you noticed? She never smiles. Professor Jane Kirtley and I are going to be right back after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Hi, it's Joan Esposito, and I want to tell you about 120 Life. 120 Life is a drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. My mom struggled with high blood pressure for much of her adult life, and for many of us, high blood pressure runs in the family. 120 Life is a great-tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve your blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure and see if it works for you. Some people reported results in as little as 2 weeks, and I've been enjoying 120 Life because I love fruit drinks. To try it, go online, 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund. And you can get a 20% discount on that order. Use the code Joan JOAN, for 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Professor Jane Kirtley. She is a professor of media ethics at the University of Minnesota, Emerita, and former executive director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. We were talking about Donald Trump and how he is rude to many reporters, the vast majority of whom are women. And I always read this criticism: why is it that nobody else, either in the press briefing room or in the White House or on Air Force One, why nobody steps up and speaks up for the way he treats these women? What do you think? Do you think that's a realistic ask?
I think that they're cowards. I mean, that's just the way I see it. I think they're cowardly that they will not do that. Again, it's not a question of coordinating your coverage or making a pact or saying, here's how we're going to do this. But I think back to, and I'm dating myself here, but during the first Persian Gulf War, when the Department of Defense was creating media pools where they were only allowing a certain number of journalists to go and cover that conflict. Obviously, they were in competitive positions, but I know for a fact that journalists would protest if somebody was not being treated properly. The broadcast journalists had a lot more leeway than the print journalists did, because they had to submit their copy for prior review to censors, for lack of a better term, whereas the broadcasters pretty much got to do whatever they wanted. But I know for a fact that broadcasters said, this is not fair. This is not the way it should be. Mm-hmm. So the point is, and that's not ancient history. I mean, we're talking about the 80s and early 90s. And so I think that's all to the good. And the fact that there have been some news organizations that have institutionally chosen to withdraw from certain pools and so forth because of the way their colleagues are being treated. That's being done on an institutional scale. But as far as the individual ones are concerned, I think, again, they're cowardly. They don't want to find themselves also in Trump's short hairs for those kinds of things. I think it's one thing to be criticized by Trump because he doesn't like your reporting, but when it starts taking on this personal aspect, mm-hmm. I think some people have trouble dealing with that, and I can't, I can't say that I blame them, but I just wish they had stiffer spines so that they'd stand up at least in defense of their colleagues.
Yeah, there is a story told about Sam Donaldson, and for those of you who are too young, Sam Donaldson was a White House correspondent, but it was back in the day when somebody like that could be a real star, and Sam Donaldson was a big, big, big name. And, when you do a story, even at the network level, you send the story off, I know the editors look at it and they'll say, well, I don't think this part is clear, or, you need to change this. Sam Donaldson famously did not feed his stories until literally minutes before they were supposed to air. And he would always be, oh my God, breaking news, but he did it so that nobody could mess with his story. It would go out exactly as he wanted it to, or it wouldn't go out at all because there wasn't time to change it. But I always thought that was a great story.
It's pretty gutsy, and as you said, he had the power to kind of get away with that sort of thing. I think everybody needs an editor, so I can't completely condone it, but I think it was a very pragmatic approach to a very real problem, which is that reporters don't like to lose control of their stories. So you're right, that's what happened.
It made a lot of news recently when the administration pulled the legal action that they were taking against the New York Times reporters who had the audacity to report that the Qatari jet didn't have the same defenses that the regular Air Force One did. Even though, within a week, Trump himself was saying, yeah, they got to, spruce it up a little bit. They got to ramp it up. But they were furious that was reported in the New York Times, and they went after the reporters. And then all of a sudden, all that legal challenge just went away. It just sort of evaporated. There was a lot of speculation that the lawyers who were bringing those actions got a really clear sense that this was a losing case, and that's why they walked away. What's your sense of that?
Well, process is everything in the law, as you know, and I think there was one big problem with the way they proceeded, which was that if they're doing it for the basis they claim they are, which is to uncover who the leakers are, the people that have the legal duty to maintain the confidentiality of the records, then there's a rule in law that says that they have to exhaust alternatives before they go after the press. And given the timing of this, how quickly these subpoenas surfaced after the original stories appeared, it was pretty clear they had not done that. And the judge made it really clear that he was not going to feel comfortable with the idea that they had gone to the journalists as the first resort, because there's tons of case law, even in jurisdictions that aren't particularly friendly to the press, that have said, no, you've got to exhaust alternative sources when the journalist is not your actual target. Of course, it leaves the question whether, in fact, the journalists are the target, but ostensibly that was the reason, and the court made it clear to the lawyers that that wasn't going to fly. What I found so chilling about it, because nothing surprises me really about what this Justice Department will do, is the fact that in addition to seeking the phone records of the reporters, they were also seeking the reporters from their family members, including people that have confidential relationships outside of the government. I mean, I believe one was like a psychiatrist and somebody else was a lawyer doing nothing having to do with any of this. And that is just, that is such an autocratic thing to do. You hear of that happening in autocratic countries where they go after people's family members, but I say that nothing they do shocks me. That shocked me. Not the phone subpoenas of the journalists so much, even though that's a violation of the Attorney General guidelines, but the fact that they would go after the family members' phones as well.
Yeah. Professor Jane Kirtley, a professor emeritus of media ethics, thank you so much for being here. Always a fun talk.
I enjoyed so much, Joan. Thank you for having me.
We are going to take a break. We'll be back with Terry Savage to talk about the Dow going in the tank today, right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
What a day to talk to financial expert Terry Savage. You can read her writing in the Tribune. But today, I've got the number here. Hang on a second, Terry. I've got it right here. The Dow closed down 1,153.18. More than 2%, lost more than 2% of its value. What's going on, Terry Savage?
You know what's getting lost here? You have an incredible instinct. I think the last few times I've been on, you call me 2 or 3 days before and say, it's time to have you on. Let's talk about money and whatever's happening that day. And sure enough, when you have me on, that's the day that the markets move big time.
Yes.
So yeah, big day
All
today.
hell breaks loose.
I think you should be trading stocks, Joan. Look, seriously, I think this headline news is certainly going to grab attention. And the official excuse, and I'm putting that in little figure quotes there, is that, well, the Fed came out today under the new Fed chairman, and for the second time in a row, 2 months he's been chair, they have decided not to raise rates. They probably will in September. They don't meet in August. And the market was, quote, disappointed because maybe they're not serious about it, fighting inflation. I personally think that's baloney. I think the market was looking for an excuse. We've seen the tech stocks sell off dramatically, many of them, the NASDAQ index down over 10%. The semiconductor stocks, which were so hot, have sold off. Then there was the whole thing, well, that's okay, the economy's strong because they're going to build data centers, and that's going to require a lot of capital investment. And stocks like Caterpillar, earth-moving stocks, were up, and then today Caterpillar fell. I think the market has gotten ahead of itself on the idea that The economy is pretty strong. There's a lot of investment going into AI physical plants. And there's now some backlash and some concern about how much is being spent on this. So I think that today's non-move by the Fed is just an excuse for a sell-off. All I do think, though, and I'll just finish with this, that it's a warning. Not a warning, everybody get out of the stock market. That's not what I do, you know that. But I do think this is a warning, and I just posted a column yesterday called Stress Test Your Money, a warning for people who are on the cusp of retirement, in retirement, at the stage of retirement when you're required to take out minimum distributions when you're 73 from your IRA. It's a warning that we have been the beneficiaries, I'm one of you, of 45 years of an incredible bull market. 45 years ago, the Dow was under 1,000. That's about when 401k plans started. No more pensions for the baby boomers. And, you know, the Dow's still over 50,000. So people who are planning to live on that money and going, wow, wasn't I smart? We put in $350 a paycheck and now we have all this money. You can't count on that being there if another bear market comes along. And it's a perfect time before a bear market does come along to take a look about maybe moving some into more conservative investments in your IRA rollover or into a money market inside your IRA, just because the baby boomer generation is getting up there and it's time to be a little more conservative. So that's my message.
That would be chicken money you're talking about, correct?
Well,
chicken
I'm
money.
telling you, yeah, chicken money. My definition of chicken money is money you cannot afford to lose. And
which is all of it. I don't want to lose any of it, not a cent of it.
Yeah, well, you know, you're a sure loser to inflation, and stocks have always beaten inflation. So you don't want to jump out of everything and say, okay, I have my IRA rollover. It was in the growth fund and the growth and income fund and the international growth fund and the small cap growth fund. You don't want to go, okay, dump all of it now, because how would you feel if the Dow goes much higher? Some analysts think it will, that we'll be on this AI productivity boom that'll take America to new heights. But what you want to do is not worry about the stock market, but about what you own. And as I said, if you're about to retire, you don't benefit from your $300 or $400 every paycheck going in when prices go down and you buy more shares. That's what happened. That's why the market kept moving up. But when the market goes, it's a funny thing, when you retire, you have a different attitude toward your money. While you're working, it's a stream. You keep adding to the stream of money going in there, you know, and you'll know you'll take it out one day. But when you retire, it's just a pool. It's like a swimming pool. That's all you've got. And when either the market goes down or you start withdrawing to live on it, the level of water in your pool goes down. And you'd like it to go down because you took a trip and took some money out, not because the market fell 20 or 30%, because that's when people panic.
Yeah. In the Wall Street Journal, this has been a few weeks now. They did a front page article about the guy whose name escapes me, but the guy who predicted the real estate collapse. The guy was portrayed in The Big Short.
Michael Burry. Yes.
Yeah, they made a point of doing an article that he is now getting rid of any stock he has in any company that is gaining value because of its use of AI. That he thinks that, and I've heard, you know, even Jamie Dimon has started to say that this might not be the safest investment.
Wait, time out.
Okay.
Time out. Jamie Dimon, whom I know, I think you know from his days in Chicago, has always been very conservative, clouds on the horizon, and good for him. I think I think I trail in his wake because responsible people who have the responsibility for a lot of money and a lot of people's money and are not calling the market turns like, and I'm not, have a responsibility to point out that there could be problems. Michael Burry, on the other hand, there's been a lot of talk about how much money is being put into, I mean, it costs a lot of money to build these data centers. That's physical stuff, AI, and there's been a lot of money poured into it. There's a lot of money poured into the semiconductor industry. And I'm not going to be a technical analyst. Somebody's going to be right calling the top. That's not my intention. My intention is to wave a flag, and this isn't the first time I've done it, to say, wait a minute, we are all victims of our own experience. And for the last basically 40 years, there have been some big shakeouts. 2007, 2008, the market was down nearly 50%. The Y2K thing, 2001, the dot-com bubble burst, the market was down 48%, the Dow, I mean. So, but the memory we have is that you just kept putting money in and it kept going higher. And if you're at the stage where this is it, this is what you want to live on, you want to think about, do I want to be that exposed now? It's not about the end of America or the end of the stock market. It's called, how much pain could I take? I don't mind taking 20% out to go buy a vacation home in Florida or take my grandchildren on a trip, but I don't want to lose 20% because the market went down, and that's what you have to consider. Because you're not gonna be going, okay, well, I'll just get back in again. You won't have that money.
Yeah. I have to tell you, when they talk about, AI and the AI bubble, when it was the dot-com bubble, I understood that. I got what a dot-com was. I don't understand what the AI bubble is. I don't understand what AI is.
Okay, that's a little beyond my scope, but let me point out that back at the dot-com bubble, people believed, and correctly believed, remember the pets.com sock puppets? Okay, well, Chewy is essentially what pets.com was. Yep. And Chewy's been a fabulous success. If you have a dog or any other animal, I guess, you buy everything from Chewy. And the fact is that the market and the stocks were valued at such high prices before the companies really had any earnings. It wasn't that the dot-com era, the online shopping versus bricks and mortar, it wasn't that it didn't transform us. It did. But the valuations of the stocks got so high that pretty soon someone turned around and said sell, and then they went to whom, because everybody owned it, and that's when stocks plummeted.
Is that the same thing that's happening with the people?
There are those who
told
say
me that there are almost no, or maybe there aren't any AI companies that are actually turning a profit right now.
Well, no, because they're all investing. Well, there's two aspects to AI. First of all, I'm sure all of you, and if you don't, you should, probably have downloaded the app ChatGPT or Perplexity or one of the other AI things. And if someone says to you, when was the last time the United States, da-da-da-da-da-da, you just click on your phone and say to Perplexity, when was the last time, or how many of these, and you get an answer right away. So we're all using this ability of artificial intelligence to, on the surface, that is, to look at all the knowledge that's ever been accumulated and instantly give you an answer. So AI has transformed our lives already, just like shopping online did. Well, there are multiple dimensions to AI, like what it can do for you and what it can do without you. We saw recent examples of the AI agent running amok and so forth. So there's no doubt that this is as transformative as, before the Reaper and the McCormick Reaper were Chicago, they plowed fields with mules. And this is equally transformative. This is like the Gutenberg, the printing presses. In a way, AI is like fire. It is just really going to transform humanity and the nature of work. And some people will left behind. But in a way, it used correctly, think of all the wonderful things it could do. Cure cancer, for example. So yes, it's scary, it's impressive. But in terms of stock market valuations, there's a lot of people who think it's gotten a little ahead of itself, just like the dot-com did in 2000.
Okay. All right. We need to take a break. I'm speaking with financial expert Terry Savage. Her column is syndicated on the Chicago Tribune and other newspapers. We'll be right back after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Hey, are you interested in buying a home? Maybe somebody in your family has died and they've left the family home to more than one person. If you need questions about estate sales and buying a home that's in someone's estate, you need to call Team Hochberg. Remember, they have nearly 500 five-star Google reviews. Cindy and her sister inherited their mom's home when she died. Cindy had been living there because she was helping her mom out as her primary caregiver. She wanted to buy the home, so she called Team Hochberg for a consultation for free. David helped Cindy get a mortgage to buy the home from her mom's estate that allowed her sister to get her share of the equity. David helped Cindy get a mortgage so she could buy her mom's home so her sister could receive her portion of the estate. If you've experienced a family loss and are having issues with an estate, call Team Hochberg, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg helped me and thousands of WCPT listeners, but they can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or go on the web to 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is financial expert Terry Savage. You can read her column in the Chicago Tribune. She is also regularly on another radio station in Chicago. We will talk
you
about
can ask questions on my website, terrysavage.com.
Yes,
By the way,
go. Hey,
I don't
Terry.
want to intrude. Wait. I don't want to intrude on your commercial, but if you had David Hochberg on, he's coming on my podcast.
I have him on once a month for an hour.
He is really helpful. I just use my mortgage guy anyway. So
and what we do is we open up the
friends.
text lines and the phone lines.
Yeah.
And virtually the entire hour, he just answers people's questions. The whole, all over the map. Now.
Okay, so there you go. All right.
He's awesome.
Oh, listen. I just thought of something. It came to mind when we were in the break. Before, I know you want to go somewhere, but what I was looking at the headlines, and Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, Meta, is down. The headline is down 10%. They reported their earnings after the close, and the headline is amidst concern over the capital spending they're doing on AI. That's a headline. You don't have to understand stock market analysis, but it reminded me of something. Do you remember what Zuckerberg's company's name was 8 years ago? It was
Wasn't it Facebook?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of the last people that still likes looking at Facebook. I see horse stories and stuff like that on there. But what I'm saying is he transformed his whole company into Meta and created this metaverse. And I just searched whatever happened to the metaverse, because don't you remember people were buying properties in this virtual reality to be next door to, the Kardashians or whatever. At the time I said, this is insane. I mean, the pets.com sock puppet, is a relic, but this was insane. $80 billion later, $80 billion. The metaverse is dead. Facebook shut it down. So if you don't think that big companies, not to mention the little people that lost money and so forth, if you don't think big companies can get carried away or make mistakes, the very name Meta, I'm always shocked that someone doesn't say, okay, Mark, are you going to transform yourself to something else now? Big mistakes do happen. Things get overextended. And that's when the greater fool theory takes place, which is who's going to buy now, and then everybody sells.
What I was going to ask you about was Donald Trump's recent announcement that seems to be insider trading to me. For I think it's for $100,000. Companies can buy to get early access to posts that he posts on Truth Social. The not too complicated idea here is, if he's going to say something that's going to affect a certain industry or a certain market or a certain stock, you get a few seconds head start so that you can trade appropriately. That doesn't seem like it should be legal to me.
Well, first of all, we've had the SEC tracks that stuff, and we've had a number of examples of when insiders, the SEC insider trading rules have been applied only to corporate proprietary knowledge, but with announcements, or even at one time when the president said you should buy stocks just before he announced he was going to waive off the tariffs for a while. That's a terrible idea. I think they've gone to court to block that idea. I would like advanced knowledge of the Fed's rate decisions. I would also like advanced knowledge of the unemployment numbers. And if I were a big hedge fund, I'd be willing to pay for advanced knowledge of some government statistics. I think it's on the, there's so much you could complain about today from the financial viewpoint, though. The ability to sell inside information is nauseating.
Yeah. What do you think of things like Kalshi, these quote unquote prediction markets?
So this is a very interesting, first on one level, there have always been odds. You know, there was Ladbrokes odds or Las Vegas odds. There have been odds on every football game or baseball game or whatever else that ever was. So in a way, it's democratizing gambling. And in a way, it's a symptom of our society right now. The question is, when does this become more than speculation, even more than gambling? It's a big issue now in regulation because they're trying to create themselves into exchanges and without being subject to all the rules of knowing your customer, Kalshi, yes, but Polymarket based offshore. This is a very complex situation, but I will say it's symptomatic of the fact that I grew up talking about investments. Oh, IBM, or I'm going to buy Apple way back because I had to switch to an Apple computer, you know. Those were long-term investments, and we live in a very, very short-term world, and that makes the world more volatile. So I don't know who's out there listening to us. Your kids are doing Kalshi and Polymarket, and they're betting on everything from sport events to political events. When it crosses the line, when someone has inside information, I think the president's teleprompter operator was just indicted for making bets because he had the script, you know. So this is a different world out there. This is a very different world, and you just don't want to get in the way of this.
What do you mean you don't want to get in the way of this? You don't want to try to oppose it? You don't want to try to regulate it?
Oh no, I'm that if Congress would do anything about regulation, this is really a critical area to be regulated. This and right now there are a number of things in Congress regarding crypto, for example, regarding the use of cryptocurrencies and whether you can make them like banks without being regulated like banks. There's a crying need for an intelligent approach to regulation of a lot of stuff in Congress. And of course, nothing is getting done there. But what I mean as an individual, you just understand that this is not like betting on whether the Bears are going to win or the Cubs will make the World Series. There's a lot to these markets, and you can get caught up in them very quickly, these prediction markets.
In addition to being a financial expert, you have always been a longtime broadcaster. What did you think when CNN announced that it was going to partner with Kalshi? The implication that I got was, you know, that maybe looking at the prediction markets might be a more accurate way to judge what's going on an issue than doing polling. At least that's the only justification I could think for it. I thought that was a very weird partnership, and the idea of it made me a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, by the way, CNBC, which is, you know, the financial station, has had a long-term partnership with Kalshi, I believe, with an investment in them. So, and, you know, CNN has Nate Silver. There are all kinds of pollsters. It turns out, I remember reading this, that in the last election, the prediction markets, where a lot of people put their money where their mouth is, happen to have been more accurate than some of the best known pollsters. That was 2 years ago. So if you want to harvest the data from very widespread markets where people literally put their money and say, I think so-and-so is going to win, I think this is going to happen, it makes sense for a news organization to have its finger on the pulse of what people are thinking. Clearly, the pollsters missed the boat last time around in a number of different areas. So, you know, that's what markets are supposed to do. Fair markets uncover a place where money agrees to disagree. And when people are not just talking about it or answering questions over a phone survey, but at a place like Kalshi or even Polymarket where they put their money up, then you get the real knowledge of what the sentiment is. And I think that's useful for a news organization.
Really? Because I thought maybe it was just kind of a flash in the pan. Oh, Kalshi's like the new hot thing, so we're going to say we're using it. But I do agree with you. In recent times, polling sucks. I mean, how many polls have we seen that basically told us, even the day before an election, this candidate's going to win, this candidate's going to lose, and all of a sudden, that's not what happens.
Exactly. So these prediction markets, that's why I said, you don't want to get in the way of them. They're very valuable. You don't want to get caught up gambling on them. This is another form of gambling. So when you were asking the personal finance person, Terry Savage, what I thought about them, I wanted to make it very clear that these are betting machines that broad and maybe exceeding their charter and maybe not being regulated enough. But for the overall concept of people being able to place a bet, literally a bet, and by doing so express their opinion, then you've got a useful tool, I think, for the news media.
Interesting. So you think it's here to stay? You think it's
oh yeah,
really? Not just here today, gone tomorrow, but here today and also tomorrow.
It's just like when the dot-com bubble burst, everyone said, so online shopping, that's not going to ever happen, right? We're always going to go to Sears. That's our store. That's our big store. Where are the Sears stores today? Where are the Kmart stores today? Okay, who doesn't go to Amazon? I mean, yes, if you may have your own personal feelings about some of these websites, but who doesn't go to Amazon to check it out first? So, of course, I mean, I bought Amazon stock the day I learned they sold more than books. It was a long time. I don't even remember how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. Things change, and you may not like the change, but you have to step back and analyze how that change is going to realistically impact your life, your investments. And I know we're going to run out of time here any minute, but I just want to leave you with this thought. We also changed. Again, we're grown-ups now. You and I have known each other for way too long to even tell. And all along, I kept saying, you don't have to be a genius. You don't have to beat the market. Just sign up for your 401k, put the maximum amount in it, buy the Standard & Poor 500 stock index. My goodness gracious, the baby boom generation has had a magnificent ride. And I think America is not over and will continue to have a magnificent ride. But again, I want to speak to this segment of the audience that now looks at their 401k with the market or their IRA with the market within shouting distance of all-time highs, even after today's 1,100-point drop, and say, okay, stock markets do have bear markets. That's a 20% drop. I've lived through in my investing lifetime 4 drops that were close to 50%. I survived. I didn't sell. I didn't panic. But it's a different thing when this is it. This is your pool of retirement money. And at some point you say to yourself, I take some chips off the table, not take it out of your IRA, but put it in the money market fund. Take a little out of each of those growth funds and say, pretty soon they're going to make me take a little money out every year. I should have some cash so I'm not forced to sell. It will let you sleep better. You may miss some of the upside. I have no doubt the market will, I hope in my lifetime, move much higher. But you will miss downside if it happens and avoid panic. And if you go to terrysavage.com, you'll pretty much see that in the latest column called Stress Test Your Money.
terrysavage.com. Terry, thank you so much for being here. I love talking
Joan.
with you. That is going to do it for me. Driving it home with Patty Vasquez is next, but Patty is out. Ken Mejia-Beal and Demi Polacek are going to be hosting in her stead. I will see you tomorrow at 2. Have a great evening and good night.